There's a version of success that looks impressive from the outside, but quietly destroys people financially from the inside. And the dangerous part is, most people don't even realize they're chasing it. Because it doesn't look like a mistake. It looks like progress. You see someone driving a luxury car, living in a high-end apartment, wearing expensive clothes, going on trips, posting experiences that make it seem like they've figured something out. And naturally, you start to associate those things with success, because that's what we've been trained to believe. If it looks expensive, it must mean they're doing well. If they can afford it, they must be ahead. But what you don't see is what it costs to maintain that image. Because looking rich and being rich are not the same thing. In fact, they often move in completely opposite directions. Looking rich requires spending. Being rich requires keeping. And you can't maximize both at the same time. That's the trade-off no one talks about clearly. Because the more you prioritize how things look, the less you're able to build what actually creates long-term stability. And this starts earlier than most people realize. It starts with small upgrades that feel harmless. You get your first real job and decide you deserve something better. A nicer place, a better car, more convenience. And again, none of those things are bad on their own. The problem is when they become the default direction of every increase in income. Every raise turns into an upgrade. Every bonus turns into a purchase. Every opportunity to build gets converted into an opportunity to spend. And over time, that creates a pattern. A pattern where your financial life is designed to support your image instead of your future. Now imagine two different paths. One person gets a raise and immediately upgrades their lifestyle to match it. Their car payment increases. Their rent increases. Their spending increases. From the outside, it looks like they're moving up. But internally, their margin hasn't changed. They're still dependent on their next paycheck. Still maintaining. Still locked into the same cycle, just at a higher level. Now imagine someone else who gets that same raise and does something different. They upgrade slightly, but not fully. They keep a portion of that increase. They create space. And that space becomes the most important decision they make. Because now they have the ability to build. While one person is increasing their appearance of wealth, the other is increasing their actual position. And at first, you can't see the difference. They look similar. They might even look like they're in the exact same place. But over time, the gap becomes impossible to ignore. Because one lifestyle requires constant input and the other creates gradual output. One drains, the other builds. And eventually, those paths separate completely. This is where the hidden cost shows up. Because maintaining the appearance of wealth is expensive, not just financially, but mentally. You start making decisions based on perception instead of logic. You choose the car that looks better instead of the one that makes sense. You choose the apartment that impresses instead of the one that gives you flexibility. You choose the lifestyle that signals success instead of the one that builds it. And every one of those decisions adds pressure. Pressure to keep earning. Pressure to maintain. Pressure to not fall behind the image you've created. And that pressure doesn't go away. It compounds, because now your life depends on sustaining a standard that doesn't actually move you forward. It just keeps you in place, and over time, that becomes exhausting. Because you're working harder, but not getting closer to freedom. You're earning more, but not keeping more. You're upgrading everything, except your financial position. And eventually, something starts to feel off. You start to realize that despite all the outward signs of success, nothing feels secure. Because it's not. It's built on continuous effort, not structure. And effort has limits. Now, here's where things shift. Because the people who eventually break out of this pattern start asking a different question. Instead of asking, "What can I afford?" they start asking, "What is this costing me long term?" Not just the monthly payment, but the opportunity, the flexibility, the ability to use that same money to build something instead of maintain something. And once you start thinking that way, your decisions begin to change. Not dramatically, but consistently. You start choosing differently in small moments. Moments that don't feel significant at the time, but compound into completely different outcomes over time. You might choose a slightly less expensive option and redirect the difference. You might delay an upgrade and build instead. You might prioritize ownership over appearance. And those decisions don't look impressive to other people. In fact, they often go unnoticed. But that's the point, because real wealth doesn't need to be visible in the beginning. It needs to be built, quietly, consistently, without constant validation. And the people who understand this stop trying to look rich. They start trying to become financially independent. And those are very different goals, because one is based on perception. The other is based on reality. One requires spending. The other requires discipline. One is immediate. The other is delayed. And that delay is what filters most people out, because it requires patience. It requires confidence in a process that doesn't show results right away. And most people aren't used to that. They want to see progress now. They want proof now. But the kind of progress that actually changes your life doesn't show up immediately. It builds, and then it compounds. And then at a certain point, it becomes obvious. That's when everything flips. Because now, instead of your lifestyle consuming your income starts building your future. Instead of needing more money to maintain your life requires less effort to sustain. And that's the moment where things start to feel different. Not because you suddenly became rich overnight, but because your direction changed. And direction determines outcome. Every time. Because if you continue prioritizing appearance, you'll always need more. But if you prioritize structure, eventually you'll need less. And needing less is where freedom begins. Because it reduces pressure, it increases flexibility, it creates options. And options are what most people are actually chasing without realizing it. Not just more money, but more control, more choice, more ability to step away without everything collapsing. And that doesn't come from looking rich. It comes from building something real, something that supports you instead of depending on you, something that grows instead of drains, something that continues even when you're not actively pushing it every day. And once you understand that clearly, your priorities change. Your decisions change. Your entire financial trajectory changes. Not instantly, but permanently. Because once you stop chasing the image and start building the structure, everything starts moving in a different direction. And if you're serious about making that shift, about building real wealth instead of just the appearance of it, subscribe to Smart Money Compounds, because this series is designed to help you break out of that cycle and build something that actually lasts.